Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today is episode number 87, and I'm really excited to have our guest on today, Antuan Vazquez, who is the CEO and co founder of DraftyAI. DraftyAI is a fairly new immigration legal tech startup. Their focus is on leveraging artificial intelligence to help attorneys with some of the aspects of immigration that is not really like case management oriented, but is really kind of helping draft, hence the name, applications. So, for example, cover letters for asylum applications, withholding of removal, 601A waivers, all of the really kind of text heavy, really complicated documentation that comes with what those kind of applications are really streamlined through Drafty. We're going to get into the conversation with Antuan about how he came to co-found Drafty AI alongside his other co-founders, one of whom is a practicing and a very experienced immigration attorney, which I'm really excited for. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko. I'm a former immigration attorney myself, and currently the CEO and co-founder of Laborless, which is an immigration tech company that automates H-1B visa compliance, as well as the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency for the immigration and mobility industry, and of course, which brings you this show. So without further ado, Antuan, thank you so much for being here. And I'm super excited to dive into your story and your personal story. And then, of course, about Drafty AI, given especially all the craze about AI in our industry right now. So thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation, Roman.
Of course. So I think for, with you and with me and so many others in our industry, both like practicing attorneys and also tech startup founders, immigration, like personally, is typically part of our story. I know your family immigrated as well. And actually, through our conversations, I wasn't sure if you came, because your family came from Cuba. Is that right?
Right.
Were you
So I
born in
was
Cuba too? I don't think that we got to that. So if you can share, that would be awesome to hear about that.
definitely. So I was born in Cuba, and I lived there for the first 7 years of my life,
Mm.
and then after that, my family immigrated to Venezuela in South America, and I lived there for another 7 years, and then after that, we moved to the United States. So essentially, once things got really bad in Venezuela, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the history, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, things got really complicated there in the political arena, and it got really complicated for business owners. Really tough situation where sort of the property and businesses were not being respected by the government. So our family had to leave, and we came to the United States. And I lived in Florida for the better part of the past 19 years or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so your parents or were business owners? Like, is that what they did in Venezuela?
Yeah, they sort of when they got there, when we got there, we had my dad's family that sort of helped my parents and I moved there.
Mm-hmm.
They covered the cost of the legal expenses because back when we were in Cuba, my dad was also a business person of sort, but
Mm-hmm.
in Cuba it was a little difficult because back then. You couldn't really have businesses. It was all like on the hush hush,
Mm-hmm.
uh, keeping it away from the government. So he had some sort of business there, selling like desserts and even working with extracting gold from like old jewelry and things like that. So anything they could do. But he was also a civil engineer,
Mm-hmm.
so he did everything he could. And my mom was sort of into accounting, had an accounting job or something. But even though they had all these sources of income or whatnot, they couldn't afford anything because back there, it was in the 90s, it was really difficult economical situation there. So they couldn't afford anything. So the family from my dad's helped them move to Venezuela. And when we got there, they sort of helped us rent into a place and helped us set up a business of what they were doing already, which was selling lottery tickets. So sort
Wow.
of like the state lotteries that we have here in the US. There were similar entities back there in Venezuela, and they
Mm-hmm.
would sell the tickets and They would also bank, like serve as a bank. So if there were prices that were paid out, so that type of business. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's so. Did your and out of curiosity, you said your father was a civil engineer. Did he do that kind of work back in Cuba?
yeah,
Road, bridges, all that. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow.
And also, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that plus kind of side business, whatever else you could do to sort of make ends meet.
Mhm.
That's crazy. So do you feel that just while we're on that topic, growing up, do you feel that were you aware of, the fact that your parents were sort of doing their own thing, making their own money, trying to kind of, be entrepreneurial in a way? I mean, maybe not as officially as perhaps you and I here today, but do you feel like that was part of, the fabric of your family, or was it just like, oh, my parents go to work and they, try to bring home whatever money they can?
Yeah, I think I mean, as a child growing up, I was very oblivious of what they were doing. Like I
Hmm.
wasn't very involved or paid too much attention, but I did get the sense of that um, sort of curiosity that they had, and as to like how they what's the next thing that they can do, how can they improve their business. And I would overhear the family discussions as to how the business was going, and what can they start next. Like in Venezuela, my dad also, besides the lottery business, he also started making desserts, like guava pastry bars, and mango pastry bars. So like he started with guava bars, and then I remember the conversations like, oh, maybe we should start selling mango bars and this other
Yeah.
things, and peanut bars. And yeah, so
That's so cool. I mean, and
yeah.
I asked that question, and we'll obviously get to this in your own story, but you were basically running your own business before starting Drafty AI, and obviously you saw an opportunity, and you saw a demand, and sort of you saw that you could actually do it. But you have to have, you're already running a business, but you still have to be the kind of person that's running a business, and at the same time thinking, what else can I do, right? What else can I what other value can I provide? So it's interesting to whether or not it was conscious or subconscious, but I suppose maybe hearing that when you were younger kind of just made that frame of mind normal. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I mean, I think if we want to get into the essence of what led me into this path of entrepreneurship,
Hmm.
uh, I think I've always been a rebel by many standards, and I've always questioned the status quo, and I've always questioned how things are done. So I've had like government type jobs, or like I work for a university, for example, and there was a ton of bureaucracy that stifled the innovation. It was really hurtful to, in my opinion, to the bureaucracy for the progress of the student learning and the opportunities that the student could have because of the limitations that the bureaucracy imposed. So I've always looked to making the world a better place by my own means. That's always
Hmm.
been my goal.
Hmm.
And also in school, I was attracted by. Uh, I had an entrepreneurship course, and I'm very very thankful for that. And that really that's what truly sparked my curiosity. That entrepreneurship course, seeing what was possible, seeing the how easy it was to just follow some framework and some steps that many other people have followed to build great things and
Hmm.
have a great impact. And I sort of connected that with what my family has done in the past, and my desires to change the world, and my ability to see like flaws in the way that companies and institutions operate. Because I think in my schooling in engineering, I also took some courses. I remember one of the courses was healthcare engineering, which was mostly about the entire healthcare system, and the way that institutions and companies operate within healthcare systems, and the relationships between insurance companies and providers, and how there are a ton of inefficiencies, and and how the system pressures doctors in a way that makes them commit errors or not treat their patients as good as they possibly can be. So I sort of feel like I have this ability to spot this sort of inefficiencies and
Hmm.
problems within industries and institutions, and I decided that that was my path. Like back
Yeah.
then, I decided I want to be an entrepreneur, and I sort of pursued it from then on. And I can tell you more
Yeah.
about the things I did after school.
And of course, you're able to sort of see those things, but then you also have to have the desire and confidence to want to do something about them, because a
Yeah,
lot of
because
people see the
it's not
flaws.
easy.
It's not easy, not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. I want to backtrack a little bit there. So, I mean, your family moved from Cuba to Venezuela, and then you moved from Venezuela to Florida, and we don't, not to talk about each of those moves individually, but you know, fast forward today, you're in the immigration space, but reflecting on when you made those moves, do you remember sort of immigrating and having that be an effect, or having immigration have an effect on you when you're 7 years old, and then 14 years old, you're growing, you're a young boy, a young teenager the second time around. What was that like for you, if you remember?
I mean, certainly it was definitely a huge impact, especially when I moved from Cuba to Venezuela. I was just starting school at the time, and I was just getting the hang of the concept of school and what it meant to make friends and all that stuff. And then I moved to a new place where all the little progress I had made as a human understanding these sort of things vanished, and I had to start fresh in a new environment, new faces, new manners, new uh, customs, a new national anthem, a new way
Right.
of like everything was just so new. Uh, and then I was also seen as an outsider by
Mm.
all the kids in the school. So it was kind of rough. Unfortunately, like a lot of the kids always saw me as an outsider, and I remember I was often called the Cuban kid, like
Mm.
So there was certainly a differentiation between me and everybody else, and I
Hmm.
think that made it a little rough to adapt and fit in and have a normal life.
Yeah.
And that was on the school side of things, but then also on the personal side, I would always hear my friends like saying things like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to my grandma's house," or "I'm gonna my
Yeah.
go have dinner with on my aunt," or "Let's go to my aunt's house so she can make us some juice or something." And I never really had that. Like all the family that I had there were sort of my dad's family,
Hmm.
and they loved me and I loved them, and I adopted them and they adopted me as family for but it was not the same. Like I knew I had an actual grandma that lived in Cuba, or
Right.
two grandmas, two grandpas, and aunts and uncles, and I just didn't have them accessible to
Hmm.
me like other
Yeah.
people did. So it was definitely rough. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's it is, right? I mean, and that's one of the beauties of staying in, wherever you're born, where your family is, and sort of having a close knit community. I always think about that, because on the other hand, traveling the world, and we'll talk about this in the future, later on today, but being a nomad and sort of seeing other parts of the world is so wonderful and has such value. But then, you can't just go to your grandma's house or your aunt's or uncle's like dinner thing, because you're in the other side of the world. So it's interesting, right? The
Yeah.
sort of pluses and minuses.
Yeah. On the positive side, though, I think having exposure to my native culture and the Cuban culture, and then having exposure to the Venezuelan culture, and seeing how being fully aware that and experiencing firsthand that humans in different parts of the world do things differently and
Mhm.
approach things differently. Like they have different approaches to problem solving. They have different approaches to socialization, how they interact with other people. I think that sort of sparks something special in humans that allows us to just have a broader perspective of the world, and it makes us. I feel like that gave me the ability to And even when I moved to the US and made relationships and friendships with people from all like a bunch of other cultures, that gave me the ability to empathize more with other people, understand people more, and then learning another language. And when I immigrated to the US, like learning another language takes that to a whole nother level. Like I oftentimes find myself in professional settings or social settings when I hear people talking to each other and somebody says something and then somebody else replies like something else, and then I immediately notice like, and I say like, hey, I think what he said is this, and you interpret it this, and you reply it this other thing that's not related to what they say, and they're all like, oh yeah, that's what I meant, and like I'm able to make those connections just because I've had exposure to other people, and there's just not able, like people who are only in their native country and they're never left and they never interact with other people, they lack that perception, and they think that what they hear is always
is the only thing.
it is. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. And look, I mean, I think one of the things when you, especially if you live with people, let's say you've never traveled. I mean, many people don't travel. I forget the statistic of how many people in America don't have a passport, an up-to-date passport, because people don't leave. And I understand that travel could be expensive. Travel can be, difficult. People have, financial or maybe like health limitations. They can't, whatever. But the point is, you can also still learn some of those things by just meeting people. One of the beautiful things, and I don't want to go off on this tangent necessarily, but the internet has allowed people that they can from home meet with and learn about other cultures through their phones, through social media. So maybe now it's a little bit hopefully better in terms of, empathizing with different cultures. But there's nothing like living it, right? There's nothing like moving to another part of the world, learning a new language, meeting with people from other cultures, and having to be friends with them. And so you're forced to empathize in a way, right? So your family moved, you guys moved to Florida. I guess you were probably around 14, 15 years old, and 15, a few years later, 15. So a few years later, you entered college, you went to university, and you studied basically bioengineering. Right.
Bioengineering, biomedical engineering. Yeah. Some people use it interchangeably.
So how did you get into that? I mean, it sounds like you could have studied business, right, and entrepreneurship, and it would have made all the sense in the world. How did you come to biomedical engineering?
It was a challenge. Like figuring out what to do after high school was a challenge. Especially, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but when I got to the US, I was dumped into the ESL program. So essentially a program for students that English is not their first language.
Right.
And unfortunately, in my school district, they didn't treat these kids very well. They treated them mostly like you just need to get by. And they when I for example, when I got out of high school and I went to college, I always wanted to be a creator and engineer. I discovered this concept early on in life, and that's what I want to do. My dad is an engineer. I want to be an engineer. But when I got out of high school, I went to college and I said, I want to be an engineer. And they asked me, where are your standardized tests? Like, what were your scores? And I was like, what is that? I had no idea. My parents got into this country. They didn't know any of this stuff. They didn't know English. They had a hard time communicating with the school staff, and the school staff wouldn't tell me any of these things because these are the ESL kids. Like they're not gonna go to college probably. It was weird. It was a difficult situation. So I had to essentially just figure all that out. I had to get an associate's in arts degree, which truly opened up my mind. I'm so glad I took that journey because it expanded my perspective of the world a lot. Actually, a lot of people minimize the value of an associate's in arts degree, but I think it's very valuable. And then after that, I was able to get the qualifications to join an engineering program. But since I was a kid, I always tinker with stuff. Like I think when I was like 9 years old, I had a plastic table and somewhere in my house with what it was sort of my little cave, and underneath it is where I had like all my electronic toys that I had enough. Like my dad would buy me some electronic toy, and I would play with it for like 2-3 days, and by day 4 it was taken apart, and under that table like were all the parts, and I had a soldering gun, and I would make other things out of the parts of the toys, and I would make them work together. So, and I had no internet back then. It was just me, like just making stuff up. And I would make contraptions like little fans and take them to school and put them on my desk. And all the other kids were always like, "Oh, what did you bring today?"
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah. So I always think.
I'm curious. Did your parents encourage that, or they just kind of left you alone?
They supported it, I think.
Yeah.
They were very supportive. Like, I mean, what parent? My dad, I think, took a lot of risk on me, like, and my mom too. Like, they agreed to buy me a soldering gun when I was like 9 years old. That's so risky. I got burned a ton of times, but they were, like, they didn't take it away from me. They were just coaching me, be like, "Oh, like, don't do that. Be careful, like whatever."
Right.
And they also, when I was very young, they also bought me a computer, which was a big deal back then, in the late 90s. In South America, a computer was, a big thing. And they would also let me take it apart, which was even crazier. So I would always take it apart and break it, and then when they would pay the technician to come fix it, I would like sit there and just watch, like,
"Oh, wow.
What are you doing?" and ask questions, and what is this for, and then what is so
would they scold you if you broke it, or they said, "Look, this is," they understood that you were trying. It's not like you meant to break it, you just didn't know what you were doing?
No, I don't remember any like harsh reprimanding or anything. No.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't like it. They
Right.
were definitely
Sure.
like maybe yell at me a little bit, but
Yeah.
nothing crazy. No.
And I guess it wasn't enough for you to not do it again, because clearly you tinkered, you continued to tinker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's great. I mean, and I love to hear that, because it really kind of paints a picture of, the kind of person that you're becoming in terms of how you view the world and what you want to do with your time, what you find interesting. Obviously, getting support for breaking things is important as a business owner, because you're breaking stuff all the time, and you have to believe that it's okay. So,
and keeping the curiosity alive. I mean, all of us are born very curious, and curiosity and that desire to learn and explore is usually like killed by parents with tough parenting practices where they're like, "Don't do that," and then they give you such big scares. They give the kids such big scares that they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm not gonna be curious again."
Right.
Yeah.
And that really, it's not even about business. It's just a positive. Being curious is just a good life trait. So all right, so you graduated from university with your bachelor's, eventually with bioengineering, biomedical engineering, and you did work in the industry for a little bit, right before you started your own business. But can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you did after you graduated, and sort of how that transitioned into starting your first business?
Yeah, I'll briefly just wrap up the thought of like how I got interested in bioengineering. So
Yeah, of course.
putting together all this curiosity that I had as a kid growing up for technology. Like I was always very curious about technology and hardware and phones. I was the first kid in my high school to have a cell phone, and so anyway, I was very curious for technology. And then during this AA degree that I told you about, I sort of started discovering things about psychology and the human brain and physiology, and then I became fascinated, like biology. I wasn't a great student in college, and I didn't have great point averages, but in the biology class, I was effortlessly like the best. Like I just and I didn't even have to study for exams. I was just pay so much attention, and I loved it so much that I would just answer the exams like, yeah, this is like just effortless.
Duh, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. The mitochondria.
Yeah.
But yeah. so I put this together, like my passion for technology and my passion for the human body that I started just developing. And I found out that my local university offered a degree where I could combine technology with the human body, and that's it. That's what I want to do in life. So yeah, after I graduated, I guess my professors liked me enough that they reached out to me, and they offered me a job managing the engineering labs for the university.
Wow.
So I became a lab manager for the bioengineering, software engineering, uh, and some environment. Actually, no, I didn't get involved with environmental, but mostly software and biomedical engineering or bioengineering labs. And there was a robotics lab, there was a virtual reality lab that I sort of had to put a lot of effort into finish building because it wasn't fully completed. And then there was a biomechanics lab, and some cell culturing lab, and some other bioengineering type of stuff, hardware lab. So I managed the technology in the laboratories and some of the like ordering supplies for the wet lab, like the cell culturing lab, and keeping the safety protocols in check, and building stuff for the virtual reality lab, coming up with projects, supporting, being the liaison between the bureaucracy of the university and the technology needs of the laboratories, helping professors essentially accomplish their goals with the classes, like whenever they wanted to put like some sort of demo, or give students access to some technology, like uh, yeah, things like that.
And do you feel like that actually scratch the itch of what you wanted to do? I mean, right? Because it sounds like a great job, but given the kind of person it sounds like you were, curious and wanted to build things and tinker, it doesn't feel like it was aligned perfectly, but I don't know.
It didn't really.
Yeah.
That was just sort of like means to an end, and also like sort of like a placeholder, and a way to gain experience. But I did really like the virtual reality, managing the virtual reality lab and the cell culturing lab. Like I would go in there oftentimes and seeing what the students were doing, like, well, I'm culturing this bacteria and then dealing with these cancer cells and growing them. And yeah, it was great. I liked it, but I
Mhm.
didn't. It, like, you're right, it didn't satisfy the itch of like building something. So yeah, but actually, also right around that time, and actually a little bit before then, I was approached by by a guy in Naples, Florida, that was starting a brain computer interface startup, and I sort of worked with him as an intern type of thing. There wasn't any like monetary compensation, but I was given a lot of freedom to create, and so I was doing that. Also, I did that for 2 years, and nearly 2 years, and that sort of overlapped with the university jobs a little bit. And we were working with creating brain computer interface things. So essentially using EEG technology to read signals from the brain,
Mhm.
and translating them into commands for computers like
Right.
robots and things like that. So that was actually pretty fulfilling and pretty cool
Yeah.
experience.
That
Yeah.
and by the way, to me, like, I feel like that's such, for somebody like you, and I mean, I would put myself in a similar camp. If you do have a job that is paying the bills, you have your health insurance, you have your 401k, but it doesn't scratch that,
Right.
curiosity or creativity itch. Doing something on the side, even if it's not for compensation, can be a really great counterbalance.
Yeah.
And it can allow you to to be exposed to this creative environment while still having, I mean, you have to work a lot, it's tiring, but at the very least you still have that experience while getting a paycheck and not having to worry about rent and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool that you did that. Was that the name of that company was Neurotech? Is that right?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you kind of did that, and I guess that helped you figure out what you might be, maybe it helped solidify that you want to work in this space or that you want to run a business, or was it sort of just let's see where
Yeah,
this goes because it's interesting?
it was it definitely contributed to and validated the fact that it was possible for me to start my own business, because
Hmm.
the owner of Neurotech, his name is Will. He was a great mentor in a way, because he showed me like, oh, like this is how I started Neurotech, and this is what we're gonna do next, and this is what the opportunities that we could take, and how we can get product developed, and like here's how we can get more talent, and here's how we can get equipment for the lab, and what do you need, and so yeah, like and how we can get funding for our
Hmm.
projects, and yeah, that definitely contributed to me knowing, like validating the fact that it was possible for me to start my own business someday and to develop products, and it showed me that I didn't have to have everything figured out.
Yeah.
That along with the actually I didn't mention, but before I left school, while I was still in school, I joined an entrepreneurship program. It's sort of like an incubator program that
Hmm.
my school was offering and still offers, and it's a very successful and amazing program where you apply with a business idea, and they take you in, and for a few months they give you all the resources you need, and they guide you through the process of building a business, including like building the business plan and the processes and applying for the legal entity and all this stuff, and they cover some of the costs, and at the end they let you pitch like a Shark Tank style
Hmm.
to local investors, to angel investors, and I did that with with two other colleagues from school, and we got some funding for that project. We got like $7,000, and we sort of try to develop that a little bit.
And
And
what was that product that you guys built, or the business that you were pitching?
it was an assistive device for low vision individuals with low vision. So
Mm.
essentially, people who are missing an eye, or both. It was the thing that we did was compact some made a very compact late lidar system that essentially it was modular, so you could attach it to any pair of glasses,
Mm.
and it would bounce a laser essentially
Hmm.
off to the side, and when it would come back, it would measure the distance and give you some haptic, like vibration feedback. So, and
Hmm.
depending on the pattern, the person could know how far away the wall was,
Right.
or
Wow.
whatever was next to them.
That
Yeah,
sounds brilliant.
yeah, it's
So
really
what
cool.
happened? What happened to that project?
What happened to that was the team. We were very young. We were very inexperienced.
Mm.
Those three of us involved, and um, I mean, we were still in school, and then right after we graduated, we sort of like didn't know where to take it, didn't take the right
Mm.
steps. We all needed money,
Right.
so we decided we need jobs, and
Yeah.
it sort of fell apart. Yeah,
$7,000 is not going to help. It can't
yeah,
support three
yeah,
post-college young adults,
exactly.
unfortunately. That's
Yeah,
really cool, though. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Just out of
yeah,
curiosity, did you build a prototype? Were you able to do something like that?
yeah.
Yeah.
We built a working prototype. We custom made like a circuit board, program a custom. It wasn't a custom microcontroller, but like an off the shelf microcontroller. Um, with the Arduino platform. I don't know if folks are
Hmm.
familiar with that, but yeah, we programmed the microcontroller, essentially the firmware of the thing,
Right.
and then the software layer of the thing, and pick the hardware components like the laser, the vibration thing, put it
Yeah.
all together into a compact thing about this big, and 3D printed the housing for it, and yeah, it was
I
working.
mean, all right. So if there are any bioengineering investors listening to this episode right now, Reach out to
Yeah.
Antuan if you want to pick up where he left off a few
Yeah.
years ago. Because that wasn't too long ago, right? That was about what, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah. About
Yeah,
7 years ago. Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, great. I mean, I thank you for sharing all that, because I think it really fills out. Not, it's not like you went from academia into working on a lab into starting your own, or joining. And I'll get to this in a moment. Clara Consulting, because
Yeah.
I want to learn about what that is and your role there, and then obviously how Drafty kind of came out of the work that you do, in part there. But you built hardware and software, which is really cool, right?
Yeah.
Selling a product is not the same as selling a service, and so you've sort of had both experiences. So I want to I do want to take a quick pause to say, for folks who are watching this live right now, I forgot to say this in the beginning, but if you have any questions or comments for Antuan or myself, leave a comment below. Obviously, if you're liking this conversation, give it a thumbs up or a clap or wherever you're watching it, and tell us where you're watching from. It's always fun to know, like when we're doing this live, at least it's always fun to know who's watching and from where, and et cetera. So yeah. So I want to get to this, concept of you joining Clara Consulting, which is, again, it's now more of a service company, although it sounds like you build products for other people or for other
It's a
companies.
service.
It's a
Service
service.
company. Yeah.
So how did you, right, because you're helping them. Talk a little bit about what the company does, just very briefly, and also sort of how you came into it and what your role is there.
Definitely. So it's a funny story, and it sort of speaks to what you were saying earlier, that when you're having a salary job, a cushy corporate type job, having something on the side can be very fulfilling. So at the time, I was working at the university and working with with neurotech, and my cousin, or adoptive cousin, so I told you, when I moved to the United States, also I had friends, and I have friends of my families that were friends of my families, that we also like adopted each other as cousins, uncles, whatever, grandfather. Like my grandma, I have a grandma here that calls me, that says I'm her grandson, and she's my grandma, but it's just another family. But
Right.
they met before we were born, and yeah, it was just really close friends, so we're family now.
Mm-hmm.
And so my cousin Javier approached me and said, "Hey man, I'm testing out the waters here in this consulting business, and it's going well, and I think you'll be really, you have a good aptitude for it, and I could really use some help." So while I was in the university, he started coaching me, and I started learning, and within a week, after a few days of him teaching me all this stuff, mind you, in my career, in my college degree, they taught me a lot about the human body and hardware and engineering processes for hardware and for concepts and procedures, and a little bit of software, but very little software.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some foundation about software, but not a ton. So most of the stuff was new to me. But because of my inclination of my entire life, I was very in tune with technology, and I understood how computers work, like at many levels. Like I understand, back then I understood how computers work at many levels: hardware, software, connectivity, networks.
Mm-hmm.
I had a decent understanding. I just remember another reason for that understanding is because I used to install security cameras as a side hustle back in college for local businesses.
Nice.
So that's another side hustle I did. That's just,
yeah.
Friends of my families knew I was technical, and they were just hiring me.
It's like when you're the one person who knows computers, everyone calls you to troubleshoot their issues. So
yeah. So anyway, so I had that aptitude, and he started teaching me. And within a week, he's like, "Hey, man, I'm really, really busy, and I don't have time to teach you anymore unless you start working with me, and you can help me put in some actual billable hours while I teach you."
Hmm.
So and it's either that or I need to hire somebody else to do this because I
Right.
can't miss the opportunity. And I had to make a decision at that point. I was like, do I say no and just keep my university job and neurotech, or do I say yes and suffer miserably for some time until I learn? And I chose the latter. And we rented a hotel room near the university for a week,
Hmm.
and we went Silicon Valley style, like no sleep, because we needed to really fulfill the billable hours that were coming and the projects from his clients. And I was learning, working. Some very often times working throughout the night, sleeping like 2-3 hours, then going to the university, doing all the stuff I needed to do at the university, going back to the hotel,
Wow.
coding, learning, coding, learning, coding, learning. So it was very intense. And then I started after some intense sessions like that intense week. We kept working just over video calls, and there was less and less things that he needed that I depended on him for, and I started learning. And I became what is known like a DevOps engineer and a cloud infrastructure solutions architect. I took on some courses, I got some certifications from Amazon Web Services, and yeah, so and I did it as a contractor for him for some time, for
Hmm.
like 2 years or so. And then he after he saw the value in me, he brought me in as a partner. So I became a managing partner. So now we're almost equal parts managing partners in
Hmm.
Clara Consulting.
When you were, and I want to get to what Clara Consulting does. So, but when you were first learning, were you still working at the lab?
I did, yeah, I
Yeah.
was. I was working there. I think after I started working with Javier, I worked at the university for like 2-3 months,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe 3.5
Wow.
months, something like that. Yeah, and it was really rough. But honestly, anyone that's watching that, it's questioning like, should I take a risk and start something? Uh, it's the answer is almost always yes. Like you should take the risk, but
Mhm.
there's a few ways of doing it. Like you could either drop everything, like if you're financially stable and you don't need the money, you could drop
Right.
everything and just dedicate your entire existence to this thing that you want to build or create. But if you're not super financially self-reliant yet, you could start it as a side business. And as long as you don't sacrifice your health or your family too
Right.
much, or maybe you might have to. I mean, and in entrepreneurship, it's unfortunately sometimes that is the case. You just have to speak with your family and friends and significant other and say, hey, this thing is really important to me. I want to give it a try, but I need to keep my current job, so I'm going to have less time for you.
Right.
And if you could do that, I mean, oftentimes, more often than not, it's really worth it to get out of an unhappy, like like a situation where you're unfulfilled in your job, and then go into something that truly fulfills your dreams or fulfills you as a person. It's really worth it, even if
Yeah.
you have to suffer at the beginning for a few months or even a year or whatever,
Yeah. Or more, but I
or
totally agree
more.
with
Yeah,
you. Yeah, I totally agree. And you look at the end of the day, some people might say, "Well, I'm going to spend all that time. What if the idea doesn't work out? What if it doesn't become, the next Airbnb?" Um, I battled with that question myself. Maybe you did too. I think for me, I always told myself, even if I don't continue on and I go back to, or I continue with my quote unquote regular job, the skills that I learned from that year, whatever, you're never going to learn it at a regular job, or you will over 20 years or 30 years, not over one.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you
yeah,
you really accelerate.
and it's been proven. You could read about this, like entrepreneurs who start one business or two business and they fail, or they're mildly successful and then didn't make it, or they whatever. The next venture is always easier and it's always more successful. So yeah, I mean, and also I'm a very big fan of Gary Vee. I don't know if you know who Gary Vee is. That it talks about
Yep.
like failing fast or failing often. Like there's this concept in the entrepreneurship culture, like failing is great. Like failing is the only way that you know that you learn. Like not the only way, but it's one of the best ways of learning. Like it's a way to learn that what you were doing is not right, and you learn the lessons and you apply it to your next, whatever you're gonna do next.
Right.
Yeah, and you gotta be, when you go into the realm of entrepreneurship, you have to be comfortable with failing. You have to be happy that you fail sometimes because you learn something. I see every failure as a learning experience. It was not. I'm doing something, a project is really excited, and it fails. It stops becoming a project and it became an academic like learning experience. Oh, great! Now I get to apply this to something else.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that people need to be reminded of, I think, very often. Just to also clarify, Clara Consulting, you do sort of technical, you help biotech, health tech, et cetera, companies with their security compliance, like cloud infrastructure, that type of thing. So you help other existing companies become more, privacy or other technically secure.
Yeah. So essentially, the world as you know it runs on the cloud, like pretty much. Like almost every company that you see out there that is like of a big size and offers a service, especially technology services out there, they run on the cloud. The biggest cloud providers are Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Services, Microsoft Azure, and then there's IBM Cloud and things like that. But for the consumer end type technology companies, the first three are the most prominent. And we essentially help companies build out their cloud infrastructure. And what is that? Those are servers, databases, cloud networks, and then the security that goes around all that, and then deployment processes, and how to store the code, how to deploy the code, how to have different environments for a test environment so that you can test their application and then move it to production, so that people can see the changes, and all those stuff. And then there's also like another aspect of our business where we help with the data engineering and analytics type of things. So think like e-commerce companies, they have a ton of marketing campaigns and they get a bunch of data from like Facebook ads, Instagram ads, TikTok ads. And then they also have like data from the company that fulfills their shipments of their products, and then what the C-level executives and the managers of those companies, it's almost impossible for them to see what's truly happening within their companies, because there's millions of data points and millions of things happening. So what we do is we take all these data sources, pull them into like common data pools or data lakes, and then it's called like a data warehouse, and then we use business intelligence softwares, they're called. They're like Excel softwares on steroids, and you can make like amazing dashboards, like pretty dashboards for the executives to make sense of all this data, and like attribute the revenue, like where's the revenue coming from, what marketing campaigns are working, what products are performing better, like those sort of things. We make pretty dashboards for them to look at it.
And focusing on the particular vertical that you're in, which is sort of healthcare, health tech, et cetera, biotech, probably allows you to understand your clients' needs more.
So that's
intimately.
We sort of been marketing to biotech lately, mostly because historically in the past like 5 years, most of our clients have been biotech. So we have the most experience with
Right.
those type of companies. But we've helped all sorts of companies. Like we've helped companies like iRobot. They make the little vacuum. We
Mm.
help them with revamp the deployment of their object avoidance software that runs on their vacuums. It actually runs on the cloud. So yeah, and we've
That's,
what was that?
I was going to say that sounds like similar technology to the glasses that you were making. There's probably some,
Well, so
understanding.
we didn't get involved
Yeah,
with
I know.
with the actual
Creation of the robot.
technology.
Yeah.
We got involved on the process that they use to
Right.
deploy the software and run it on the cloud. It's actually like an
Yeah.
internal tool that they use to develop that software. It's complicated,
Yeah.
but
Still, it's if I was pitching them, I'd say, by the way, I've built technology that also, understands surroundings. So
yeah.
it's just like another way of leveraging your knowledge.
Yeah. So yeah, and we've helped all sorts of we've helped some financial tech companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So and that's great. And the reason I wanted to ask is because to sort of understand what type of work exactly you do at Clara. So I guess the big question is, we've sort of understood where you came from in terms of academics, in terms of interests. Obviously you've tried different things. You've built a startup internally with your college classmates, which sounds like an amazing idea that that maybe again you'll bring it back someday. How did all of that culminate into building what is now an AI based tech company that helps immigration lawyers?
Yep. So in short, back in January of this year, when you couldn't hear anything on the news, or like you started hearing on the news very often, like AI this, ChatGPT. I mean, maybe not on the mainstream news so much back then, but at least on the tech news outlets that I typically look at, I started getting on my feeds like all this news about AI, and I was like, okay, this is moving really fast. Like I had notions of all this. I knew that this stuff existed, but I didn't know it was becoming so powerful and so popular so quickly. So and at Clara, we're oftentimes looking to productize the things that we do. Like for a while, we've been looking to, we do this stuff for customers. Basically, there's this concept of SaaS, software as a service, which is what your company, and essentially that's a company that creates a product and that is a software that does a thing that people pay to use it regularly and pay a subscription. And we've realized that what we do for our clients covers all the aspects of what a SaaS company needs. And then there's also other things that we've looked to productize that are more technical, that are products that we could sell only like B2B, like to enterprise clients, but also looking to see what we could productize for consumers. Because right now Clara only engages with B2B service.
Right.
So I was thinking back then in January, like, okay, there's this AI revolution happening. What can I do? I was just brainstorming by myself, like, what can Clara do to leverage this AI large language models, namely ChatGPT, to create a product that could be sold as a service. And while I was in the midst of that, I spent a few hours, I don't know how many hours, brainstorming and looking at options and things. I remember that my friend, my long-term friend that we've been friends for about 16 plus years, Nadine Navarro, is an immigration attorney, and I sort of started thinking. I remember that because sorry, I'm like trying to remember what happened. So the ChatGPT is a large language model. So it basically is an AI model that leverages language, works with language, and is extremely good at interpreting language and producing more language words. So I was thinking, what can we do? What's word heavy? And there were also this application. There were all these people building things and that would create stories and things like that. And I was like, I remember all the stories that Nadine has told me, that how she spends countless hours writing these briefs that require not only technical knowledge but creative writing. And ChatGPT has both. It has a lot of technical knowledge. You can essentially train the thing to behave as an attorney, and it has a lot of creative writing skills. So I put two and two together, and I told her, I sent her a text message, hey Nadine, I have this idea that we could use this technology to help attorneys write legal briefs. What do you think about it? And her immediate reply was, attorneys she said something along the lines of, well, that sounds cool, but I don't think a robot can do what I do. It requires a lot of skills. I don't think a robot can do what someone who went through law school can do. Whatever. And it was some sort of negative reply, like, it's cool, but I don't think it's possible because lawyers are irreplaceable. And then I showed her, I was like, I didn't know how to reply, because her reply was like very solid. It made a ton of sense. So I didn't know how to I didn't have a counter argument for her. So what I did is, I remember she does special talent visas for athletes and things like that. So I just looked up a famous jockey, and I said to ChatGPT, hey, write a legal brief for a special talent visa for this jockey. And I recorded my screen as I wrote it, and sent her the video. And she like immediately replied like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. Like, what? And I was like, okay, we're in.
Yeah.
So yeah. So obviously, there's a lot more to that, but I realized, like, Clara had all the resources that it would take, that the funding, not a crazy amount of funding, but we could afford to fund a new startup, and we had the team, the technical skills, and the leadership. So I brought in Javier, and Nadine, Javier, and I met and a few times, and we, Javier also has a ton of experience. Javier is a serial entrepreneur. He started multiple companies in the past, and he one of his companies actually has raised I think about 7 million in funding already, and they went through Series A already of funding. So he has a ton of experience in the leadership of companies and how to bring in investors, and so essentially we made him the CTO, because he also has way more experience than me in software. He has, I think, like 14 or 15 years of experience in software. So, and then Nadine is the chief legal counsel, and I'm the CEO. And basically, the way we evaluated that it was a viable idea is because the technology is indisputably like powerful, and we knew it was only going to get more powerful, and that we can make it way better in the future and make our own technology once we're later down the road. The fact that Nadine is actually it's a very, very good attorney and has a reputation within the immigration attorneys community. She gets invited to conferences as a speaker, and she's looked at within the sub niche that she does, like the special talent visas and sports immigration. She's looked up as an expert by her colleagues. So she has a good reputation, and she's very smart, very talented. Javier has all this experience in the startup world and technology, and I'm sort of the guy, the idea guy. I have all this experience in technology as well, and bringing people together and understanding the needs and just steering the company in the right direction. We saw that we had a really good, powerful team, so we decided to form a company and pursue the idea.
So what does DraftyAI, do today? I mean, I know you guys are about a year old now.
Almost.
So almost, yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, what DraftyAI does today first, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about perhaps plans in the future or what other things you're working on, et cetera.
Yep. So far, we've built a very comprehensive software tool that attorneys can come in and self-serve, sign up for a trial on our website, and from there they can use the tool to draft documents. And we started with asylum and withholding or removal briefs. So essentially, once they get to the point in the journey of a case where they need a brief, they can come to our tool and answer a questionnaire. They can send a link to their clients to fill out, to gain some information from their client that will populate their client profile, or they can add it themselves, and they can then answer our questionnaire, which is essentially a very optimized series of questions that we need the answer to craft a good legal brief for the specific document. So we put in a lot of effort into mainly Nadine into ensuring that we ask the right questions and that we ask the least amount of questions as possible to minimize work. And then once they answer these questions, once they have all the information from the client and they answer all the questions, they hit submit, and our tool produces a document within 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes a little longer, sometimes it takes a little less, but within a few minutes, you get a document downloads to your desktop with a full brief, a full asylum brief, or actually right now we have I-601A waivers briefs up already, and they're in preview. So we're not even charging customers for them. We're letting customers do as many of those briefs as possible because we're seeking feedback. But then you can produce those as well. And it could be anywhere from 5 to 15, 20 pages that you get produced within a few minutes. And the way it works is our software tool takes that information that the attorney inputted, and it runs through our software layer and our prompt engineering layer, and it creates a bunch of prompts based on some logic that we created, and it starts feeding that to the ChatGPT APIs. And once we get back the answers, then we sort of stitch them together and put them into a document. And it gets there's no templating. We don't use a template. We craft our prompts to let the AI take a fresh look at every case every time.
Yeah. Now, how do you deal with? I mean, that sounds really awesome, and I, the idea is to go back to Nadine's question, or initial answer to your question, I should say, about this idea that immigration lawyers, are irreplaceable, or at the very least, are crucial to and central to the work. I mean, you can use as much technology as you can to make things easier. And maybe there are some very, very simple processes that can be almost fully automated. But for the most part, you will always, at least for now, require or would want to have the overview of a human being, looking at what the AI comes up with, looking at the draft and making changes, surely. Right now, what is the sense of how much private PII you give about the client into Drafty. I know one of the concerns in the immigration bar isn't even really about, oh, AI is going to take my job. It's really more about I don't want to give, or I shouldn't give, Chat GPT, or I should say the OpenAI, the parent company. I don't want to give OpenAI my clients' names. I don't want to give their address. I don't want to give their private information, their family members' names. How do you feel about that, or how do you deal with that kind of a thing with Drafty?
Yeah, so there's two things you bring up. You bring up there. One, the role of the attorney, which as of now, I also agree that attorneys are replaceable, because I mean, what we're doing is drafting a legal brief for the case. But before you get to that point, before you get to the point where you're writing a brief to a court, there's a ton of stuff that happens before,
Right.
like, and like the attorney at least the attorney has to help navigate the complex evaluation of like what you qualify for as an immigrant, like, and there's a ton of stuff that I'm not even familiar with because I'm not an attorney, but yeah, like, we still need attorneys, and in fact our software is for attorneys. It's a tool for attorneys, right? But then about security, so ChatGPT or OpenAI is is the company. They've made it very clear as of a few months ago, and Sam, the CEO, restated it a few days ago in the keynote that they gave, that they do not train on data that gets sent through the APIs, and they don't leverage data that gets sent through the APIs. So if you as an attorney go to ChatGPT right now and you start typing a bunch of stuff, like on the tool ChatGPT itself, and you start typing a bunch of stuff, OpenAI will train on that data, and that data will be used for, the ChatGPT thing will learn it and will use it, most likely. But if you come to a tool like Drafty, none of that data will be leveraged by OpenAI. What they claim is that they hold it for 30 days for compliance purposes, and then it gets destroyed. But for those 30 days, they hold it very securely, and Microsoft is backing up these claims. Microsoft is, Microsoft Azure. It's a great platform. It's super secure. It's actually the go-to for most enterprise or large companies because they're super secure. So I'm pretty sure they're doing a really good job of safekeeping that data for those 30 days, and then it gets destroyed.
Yeah.
And then also on Drafty's end, to even be more on the side of caution, we encrypt the personal data, and the client's data and the attorney's data. We encrypt it, and before we send that out for the APIs to process. So even if there was some sort of magical leak on the other end, they wouldn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And then when we get back the answers, then we decrypt and reintegrate things on our end locally, and then we download the brief to the attorney's desktop.
Oh wow! So you're not, so the way the brief is delivered, it doesn't even live in the cloud for the attorney. It gets directly put onto downloaded to their computer.
Correct. So we are storing it ourselves too. We started doing it recently, but it's also fully encrypted and it's not accessible for anything. And actually, it is in production now, but and it's only for troubleshooting. We honestly, as a very young company, we implemented that because we knew we might need it in the future for if we need to comply with something. But that data doesn't get access for anything. It's just there, not accessible to humans.
And maybe if eventually there is a place where the user wants to see all their prior drafts in a dashboard or their own sort of internal view, that's
where we're going. That's where we're going with that, because we've had some feedback that you want to, like, a lot of attorneys would like to just manage the production of the drafts in there. But I mean, we've been doing this we've been handling security for many years for other companies, and we know how to do it. We're doing it in a way. We don't have a SOC 2 certification yet, but we're doing it in a way that complies with those standards anyway.
Right.
So,
And look, this is the natural progression of a startup. Your first and foremost focus is to build the core product, and then you build the management layer, the administrative layer around that product. So how do you add new users? How do you see your historic data? How do you delete or undo a deleted thing? Like, those are all things that come with time. I think one of the reasons I love the show and talking to people earlier on in the product development life cycle is because, in my experience, immigration lawyers usually are not developers. They usually have not worked at a startup. And so whenever they interact with software, that software is usually pretty mature and like it has all these different pieces. And, I want to open up the understanding of our industry and maybe more generally about what companies that are earlier look like, and that just because you don't have certain things that other companies, quote unquote, have, doesn't mean that they shouldn't trust you. They shouldn't use you, and then they can give you feedback on the things that you're missing, and then you'll know how to develop. I think that education has been a long-term goal of mine within the immigration and broader mobility industry. I can tell you from being at the AILA, the Immigration Tech Summit, a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco, there are way more immigration attorneys that not only are interested in tech, they kind of really understand how it works in the development, and they have a bigger appetite for experimenting, really with startups. I mean, we're 6 years plus in with Laborless, and we're still a startup, right? And we still have to convince some of the firms out there, especially bigger ones, that they should take a chance on us, if you will, and that anything that's missing, we will build it for them, but we need their feedback. And in order to get their feedback, they have to use us. So
yeah. And something that I could say to appease the minds of some attorneys that may be watching and may be hesitant to use your tool or our tool, something that I could say is, well, at least with our tool, it's not a scrappy, like it's not a startup that is like very starting up, not knowing what to do. We've had a ton of experience building this type of super secure systems for biotechnology companies that need to comply with PII standards, HIPAA standards, even PCI standards for financial companies. So we know what it takes to secure data, and we've done it successfully many times. But even I mean, I cannot speak for your startup, but I'm assuming that you use some cloud companies, like cloud providers. And what I can say that may appease the minds of all these people, of all these attorneys that might be hesitant, is the large companies and the small companies, we all use the cloud providers, and most of the security, or not most, but a lot of the security is, I could say most, I think, is built out already by these cloud providers.
Right.
So the same systems that are used for for example, the companies that you use to fill out forms for, and you give all those companies a ton of all your customers' data or your clients' data, the way they store that data is most likely the same way that we store it. They store in a cloud provider that has a ton of security implemented. And the way that most data leaks and bad things happen in terms of security and privacy in tech right now, it's usually human error. It's some human that either accidentally went and shared something, or that fell into some social engineering scheme. And we are fully aware of all that stuff, and we take great care to protect our customers' data.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I definitely agree with you. Our Laborless is built on AWS, and my CTO comes from the fintech space, and he's been building secure, very very secure software for large institutions for many years. So it's really, and I will say, for a company that's starting up, to vet the technical knowledge of the people creating it in our industry at least is really important. If you're building a startup that's a marketplace between cereal companies and milk companies, okay, maybe you don't need to have SOC 2 because who cares, right? You're not putting out personally identifiable information, but for the legal industry, certainly you're handling sensitive data. So knowing that the founders behind or the team behind building a startup not only understands but has experience with high levels of security is crucial. So I love that you shared that. I wanted to take a quick pause here just because we have a couple of comments and just to address them. So we had Heather Nordy here saying, this is when I was talking to you about how when you worked with iRobot, so what you built with your glasses is very similar to what iRobot technology has. So I like that. Thank you for the comment, Heather. Seth made a joke and said, "Can we send the robots to law school?" That'd be scary. I'm okay with that as long as they A, share their notes, and B, they don't affect the curve of the grade. Because if I'm fighting against law firm robots for the curve, I'm not cool with that. So thanks, Seth. And then we had here, Pierre says it Anywhere. So Anywhere is another startup in our industry, or I would say startup. Pierre says, after 10 years, we still consider ourselves as a scale up. And that sounds, time is relative. 10 years could be, if you've raised $200 million over 10 years, maybe you're not a startup anymore, but people still look at Google and Facebook as a startup. I actually think whether you're a quote unquote a startup is very often how you just continue to grow in your mindset rather than like your size. So hey, thanks for the comments, everybody, and keep them coming. I wanted to, as we come to a close here, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, okay, so DraftyAI is obviously helping with some very technical aspects of asylum cases, 601A, removal of a condition. It's not just the forms, but you're helping with the kind of the writing, right? You're creating those first drafts. Where else do you see DraftyAI bringing value to the immigration industry, or maybe even like going beyond immigration and saying, okay, who else is drafting things like that? I mean, what do you guys, from what you can share, what are some of the thoughts you have about the future of the product?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind sharing pretty much everything because, we're very open and we love to share ideas and just even collaborate with other people if possible. So we have tons and tons of ideas to implement things that will make the lives of immigration attorneys much, much better and pleasant. The thing is that we have limited resources. So Clara Consulting birthed DraftyAI. And from the past year or so, or almost a year, we've been fully funding. Clara has been fully funding Drafty, and so we have very limited resources. And Drafty actually recently, about a month or two ago, we started bringing in revenue, but it's not enough to not enough to make big investments in hiring, expanding the team or whatnot. But we are seeking funding. So as soon as we get some funding, we will work on these ideas, and the sky's the limit. We're actually thinking of applying for YC, Y Combinator. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah, so actually Javier's other company, Mayan, is a Y Combinator company. So we're going to apply in January. We're going to apply, and also we're also seeking other ways of fundings from private equity or other investors. But once we get funding, we're looking to build out, obviously, expand the document types that we could do to pretty much everything. So all the types of legal briefs that an immigration attorney would need to produce. We're also thinking of, for example, facilitating the intake of clients for them. So you could imagine with AI technology, I mean, I feel comfortable saying it because it's super obvious. It's no secret that you could there's a lot of people imagining right now you could just have an AI that takes a call with your client as an attorney and takes in the story, digests it for you, and then feeds it to the software that you use to fill out the forms, and then feeds it to Drafty so that you can get the legal brief, and then presents you some sort of like dashboard with the facts of the case, what the client actually said. Maybe they said it in another language. You have the original transcript, the audio, and then what the AI interpreted and what the AI thinks should be the angle that you should take with this case. And then you, as an attorney, have a bird's eye view of all the pieces of the puzzle, and you start making decisions, and you start triggering form generations and triggering the generation of a brief, and then you evaluate the form. Was the form filled out right? Then you evaluate the brief. Is the brief good quality? Do you need to you most likely will need to make edits, or certainly you will need to make edits, I would say. So yeah, those sort of things. I think those will be very, very valuable, and we've had a lot of attorneys ask us for those sort of things. And what I said is not a single idea. It's a sort of like comprehensive general vision that encompasses many, many different tools. But yeah, that's where we're sort of taking this, and eventually, for this, you could imagine the amount of money that will require, because you not only need the technical engineering power for the front end, the back end, the infrastructure, all the security, all the technical stuff, but you also need to hire a bunch of consulting attorneys to like validate all these processes and come up with the workflows and the frameworks. So it would take a lot of investment to build all this out, but I think we're going to do it, and I think we're going to do a great job. And eventually, we would like to expand to all other areas of law. So not only immigration, but then personal injury, you name it. Yeah.
Yeah. And this brings up questions for me. I mean, not that we have the answers, but just thoughts to discuss later of the human side of it, right? So you talked about your interest in psychology that you picked up, and just the interaction between people and machines, which you literally worked on back in school. Will people share their whole story to a robot? How will the robot ask them follow-up questions? Will the robot be able to make them feel comfortable enough to remember a key or share a key point, which could be the difference between the waiver 601A working or not? There's no right, maybe there's no right or wrong answer. So, these kind of questions are the questions that will continue to come up in our industry, where we, are serving humans for a really human, thing, but we want to incorporate technology as much as possible, and sort of, where will that balance be? I don't have an answer, but I think it's something that we continue to talk about.
Yeah, and if I may, I think I have not an answer, but some idea of how that will play out.
Sure.
Do we have time?
If we have time.
Okay. We humans think of ourselves as like a super advanced species. We're super knowledgeable, and we think of ourselves as very smart and very intelligent, but in reality, we're sort of a primitive civilization, and there's a lot of things that we don't know, and technology is evolving at a rate that we cannot comprehend, and like it's exponential, and humans don't understand the concept of exponential growth. It's really hard for us to grasp, and it's really difficult for us to use all this technology that we have at our disposal appropriately, and to embed it into our antiquated systems that have a ton of friction and bureaucracy. So what's most likely going to happen is that there's going to be a world where, at least in the immigration space, there's going to be a world very soon where there's going to be immigration attorneys that leverage AI and immigration attorneys that don't, and they're going to have customers for there's going to be customers for both, because there's going to be customers that, I think Florida is pushing some legislation that attorneys will have to disclose whether they're using AI or
Right.
not, and there's going to be customers that would be okay with it and customers that will not be okay with it. And at least for the near term, but eventually, through trial and error, we're gonna realize that AI can indeed do a better job than us humans, and do it way faster and more effective and efficiently and better in general. And I don't know how many years it will take, but eventually we will all move to leveraging AI for all this task that just takes so much of our human time, that take us away from our friends and families and whatnot. So we will move to using AI. And a good analogy that I've thought of recently is this is very similar to the concept of self-driving cars. Like, think of a lot of people are super scared of self-driving cars, and that's understandable. We humans are naturally scared of things that we don't know, and it's really hard to understand all the stuff that's happening inside the brains of a self-driving car. And then you see in the news, oh, a Tesla killed this person, and everybody's like, oh my God, like a Tesla burned, the battery blew up in flames, and then people are like, oh my God, it's in the news, it's crazy. But if you think about it, how many gas cars burn all the time?
Right.
How many people die in car accidents every second or every few seconds? It's crazy. And if you normalize the statistics and compare them, you see that the rate of deaths and accidents in human-driven cars is much higher than in self-driving cars. It's just that all this is new and scary. But if you were suddenly to flip a switch and change everybody to self-driving cars right now, at least the best ones that we have, there will be way less accidents and way less people will die. But it's hard for us to understand, like, as a civilization.
Yeah, I always thought about, and I think a lot of people know that, but maybe they don't internalize that notion. I've always thought about the idea that they don't like the idea of fully self-driving cars, not because they think the cars will be worse, but because it's hard to point a finger at somebody when something bad does happen and assign blame. And I think, and especially in personal injury, where there's somebody who's injured that is trying to get justice from the person or entity that injured them. We, as humans, we want to look at someone in the face that, when something bad has happened, and say it was your fault or you should have done better. And when a robot does that, that notion is sort of gone, and the people who you can blame are far away from the accident. They're engineers. They are so. And again, I think this is just something that we will come to terms with as a society. But it is it's a thought that comes up, right? Of like, how will the human being interact with the artificial intelligence in the immigration industry, in the driving industry, in the medical, surgery? Maybe there's some surgeries that can be done fully automated. So we're slowly getting to a place where we're becoming okay with it. It will be really interesting if I could fast forward 200 years. Number one, assuming that the planet's still here and we're all human beings are still alive, but assuming that that's the case, what will be automated and to what extent, and then what's the data that we can compare in that future state to like previously, and to say like, wait, we had human beings cut open other human beings to fix them. That's insane. Human beings made so many errors. I can't believe we ever lived in a world like that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, for sure.
But that's why I said that we're very primitive, because we still, like what you said about the responsibility, that's a concept that I cannot grasp. Like, us as humans, we haven't figured it out yet. So
So let me ask you this as we wrap up. What's something that you think, I'm trying to end my interviews with this question now, because I think it's interesting for those listening and hopefully interesting for the guest. Um, what's something you think that you've learned over time, and especially now that you've built several companies, or you've been part of several companies, and you're still at the early stages of Drafty, so there's a lot you can still implement. What's a lesson you think that you've learned that you're going to implement going forward with Drafty, and that you would also maybe encourage other startup or other entrepreneurs to leverage as they build their businesses?
Yeah, you know, that's a very good and hard question, but I think I'm gonna go for this answer. Um, Often, and I'm just crafting this answer as I
Hmm.
speak, so bear with me. I've heard many people over time say that it's all about people, and I
Hmm.
think I'm starting to get a better understanding of uh, of what that actually means. And as a leader in the startup world, or in the business world, or in society in general, I think one must be conscientious and uh, appreciative of the people that you work with, the people that you're catering to with your business or your product. Uh, and so and I think this is all about people, has many meanings. So for example, it's the people you work with, make sure you treat them with respect. Have create a safe and comfortable working environment for them, so that they are at their best. Like, don't force people to overwork themselves. Like, give them freedom. Like, for example, all my companies that I've been involved with have always been fully remote, even before COVID. Before COVID existed, we always been fully remote, and so far I haven't found a reason to change that. And I think
Hmm.
we'll always be remote. And I just feel like that gives people so much flexibility within their lives. And I don't require anyone to, as long as they get their job done. Like, we have weekly planning meetings. As long as the work is done, I don't require them to be in the computer for 8 hours straight. Like,
Right.
give people freedom. Whenever people need a day off, like, just take the day off.
Right.
Um, and be aware of, like, their emotional, something that we don't value in corporate America is, like, the emotional health of people. So, like, checking with the people that are working in your team, like, how are you doing, like, emotionally? Like, are you doing well? How's your family? And sort of, like, be aware of that, and create an environment where your employees and teammates can have a good emotional health.
Hmm.
And then the people that you're selling to, like, we were just talking about security. Like, just for the sake of profiting, don't jeopardize people's security, people's lives, people's reputation. Like, uh, just be careful with those type of things, and then be respectful of them. And then if I mean, at least my mindset, if I'm going to make money with something, I might as well do it with something that's truly going to help people and add value. Like, I've seen some business models and some other type of companies. I mean, as an engineer, as a creator, I can do almost any type of company that I want. I can create hardware company, I can create software companies, I can create service companies, I can do whatever. But I want to do things that truly help people. I don't want to
Hmm.
create this skin that just makes money for no reason.
Right.
It wouldn't fulfill me. So, because then you get the reward of seeing satisfaction in other people, and knowing that you did something good for the world. And that, getting that reward is very fulfilling, and it drives you. And it's the kind of things that bring happiness, that make you happy. And yeah, so that's why I'm saying, like, it's all about people.
Yeah.
And to have a successful company, if you create a good environment for your team, they're gonna fight for you. They're gonna put in the extra hours even when you don't ask them to. They're gonna make sure they do a good job, that the quality of the product and the work they're doing is as best as possible, because they know you care about them and they care about you. So it's not a transactional relationship. It's a good human quality relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Antoine, thank you so much. This has been a really awesome conversation. I'm excited, to continue to hear about where you're going with Drafty. Of course, we'll all be continuing to keep tabs and watch the company grow, and hopefully see you at some more conferences.
Thanks, man.
Some immigration conferences. So thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, and for sure we'll stay in touch and see how we can grow together.
That's right. Amen. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks everybody so much. What an awesome conversation, and really exciting to continue to see how AI, which is all over the news and all over, other industries, is making its way into immigration. So I'm very excited for it. Hope you all are too. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your comments and for sticking around and watching and listening. And see you next week. In the meantime, please stay safe out there and take care of yourselves. Peace out.